Choyo sampo pa gyo trashi pa tuche tempe chinle yar ngoda pelge drolor zampe ze parch palde lame shabla solwade Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonish Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sane Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke kudan dagi olu Pakyuke sundan dagi nga Pakyuke tukdan dagi Tön yerme çıktı çingi olu Makyuke kudan dagi olu Makyuke sundan dagi nga Makyuke tukdan dagi Tön yerme çıktı çingi Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipeki Choshiameto Tramare Rabalingashi Nidegempa Sange Shinto Mikte Ulvarki Drokun Namdashingla Chöpar Shoidam Guru Ratna Mandra Tayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chin Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki drola pinchra sangye druparasho, sangye chedan sogi chonamla, chancho pardo dani kyapsuchi, dagi chushe gibe sonamki, drola pinchra sangye druparasho, sangye chedan sogi chonamla, chancho pardo dani kyapsuchi, dagi chushe gibe sonamgi, drola pinchra sangye druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Aye ke dan ludan chinke drubundanda mi kenamdam drowa kuinge dranama che tsampa tamche ketu dage che tento.
Before we leave on a trip, it's important for us to believe in our destination and have a vague idea of, at least a vague idea of the trip we need to take. For example, if I need to go somewhere and I have no idea how to get there. I mean, do I go north? Do I go south? Do I go west? Do I just start walking and somehow I'll get there? I mean, normally when we go towards a place, we have an objective. It's important not only to know where we are going, but have an idea of the actual way to get there, at least know which direction we need to go. Otherwise, there's the danger that we would want to go somewhere, and then I realize at some point that I'm going actually to the opposite in the opposite direction. So when we talk about the path towards enlightenment, one of the arrival points and as a consequence the starting point is the development of bodhichitta, the so-called mind of enlightenment. Bodhi means enlightenment and enlightened mind. So it's an arrival point, but it's also a starting point. So it depends on where we are. So for most of us, bodhicitta is an objective, is somewhere to reach, and it's important for us to understand what it is. Once we have some clarity as to what bodhicitta is, at this point we can study the ways to get there, the right ways to get there. We can, a little bit like when we take a map and we look at the way to go, we see that, okay, this is shorter, but it's more difficult, it's longer, but maybe there are fewer ups and downs. I mean, it depends a little bit on the way we want to take. If we, for example, when we travel, we're used to using navigate them with GPSs, and a GPS can give us 3 different possibilities, and then at one point one chooses one of the 3. But if, as you're taking one, maybe you realize it's better to take another. And sometimes maybe the first part of the road is a common path, and then it splits off. But what's important is to have this vision, this idea of where I want to go and what are the ways that can take me there. After that, one actually leaves for the trip and does what's necessary to get and to reach that objective. When we study the Buddhist path in a more structured way or a more academic way, etc., we often start with definitions. So, for example, bodhicitta as a term, to understand what it is, first of all, it's defined. And the definition of bodhicitta in Tibetan says, it depends on what philosophical school one follows, but that's according to the school that I studied. And when we debate to talk about a subject, one needs to know the definition, and that's why we memorize the definition. This first part, it's the state, it's the mind. It's the mind that directs itself towards enlightenment, for the benefit of others. For the benefit of others. To benefit means the freedom of suffering, the freedom of all-permeating suffering. And all sentient beings means each one, everyone, for the benefit of each one and everyone, and the mind that goes towards enlightenment. It directs itself towards enlightenment. And it goes together with the desire to reach enlightenment. Then that's part of the method. There's the part of wisdom, and then there's part of the method. Kempa means it's a primary mind, it's a knowledge, it's a state of consciousness, is bodhicitta. It's a state of consciousness that has this aspiration that has 2 characteristics. Desire that every being gets out of suffering, that is free from suffering, it reaches a state of nirvana. And obviously, before I can desire that a being gets out of samsara and reaches nirvana, first of all, I need to understand what samsara is, what nirvana is, and desire to get out of samsara myself, desire to reach nirvana myself, and then I can see the other and say, yes, I desire this also for you. So one has this intention where we say, I want every being to be free from suffering, the cycle of suffering from suffering, the suffering of change, and all-permeating suffering, and at the same time, so they could reach this state of peace, the so-called nirvana. And to do this, I have no alternative but to develop my qualities to their maximum potential. So I desire strongly to become a Buddha. When we study this, it's said that there are two different approaches to develop bodhicitta. You know, centuries and centuries ago, even at the time of Buddha, there's one approach that says those who have a superior intellectual state, the more intelligent, let's say, and then there are those who are less intelligent. Which ones do we belong to? Of course, we're the more intelligent group. I don't know what we mean by the more intelligent, less intelligent is the following. Those who have a greater intellectual ability are those who, before they believe in it, they need to really understand it. Before they say, yes, I'm going to follow, it's possible. Before believing in something, one needs to understand it, comprehend it through their own process of logic, and one reaches the understanding of something. Those who are less intelligent, let's say, they don't follow exclusively their own logic, but also faith, in the sense, yes, I want to understand, but before I fully understand it, I believe in you, and so I'm going to follow. And it's not that those who have a lower intellectual ability don't have to understand, but first they have faith in those who follow, have faith in those who guide, and they follow based on that faith. So those who have a lower intellectual ability, they can desire enlightenment, even without really understanding what enlightenment is. If there's an idea, maybe one has a general idea that enlightenment is a state of freedom from suffering, where one's own mental defilements are overcome, and one has developed all their qualities of love and wisdom, and there's no more grasping at inherent existence. One has developed one's own qualities to the maximum potential, and as a consequence, one has eliminated every mental defilement. Maybe one can say, okay, beautiful, that's what I want. But at this point, we've understood more or less what we mean by enlightenment. But do we have a logical understanding ourselves that explains it deeply? Not really. No. So for those who are, let's say, those who follow reason, before believing in something, they need to understand it. So before saying, I'm going to take refuge in Buddha, I need to understand what a Buddha is. Before desiring reaching enlightenment, I need to have a clear idea of what enlightenment is, and if it's possible for me to get there. And it's for this reason that for those who have this higher intellectual ability, and even at the time of Lama Tsongkhapa, basically they were basically saying that there weren't they were no longer present. So I don't know if we're part of that group anyway. Even I would say that today we think that we're actually part of the less intelligent group, thinking that we're more intelligent. In the sense that we follow so many things blindly, and we expect to understand them all. And I'm not just talking about the spiritual realm. I mean, often it's just enough just for the news to say something that we believe in it. This was said. Oh, but did you confirm it? Those who have a higher intellectual ability, they don't believe until they fully understand it or they experience it. So they can say, I know that in this newspaper they said this, so I'm not going to say it's like this because I don't have a logical reasoning to explain it, and I don't know for myself. So, have we ever been manipulated by the media? Where maybe one station gives one version and another gives another. I remember once in India, there was a time like England was selling arms to Pakistan and the United States was against it. And on the BBC website, on the BBC television, in the news, they were showing. They cut up the interview to show that it was right to sell arms to Pakistan, and instead on CNN, they were showing the same interview, but they cut up the interview to show that it was negative. And negative. It was a bad thing to sell arms to Pakistan, So anyway, I look, here I don't look at the TV very often, but you can see if you go from one channel to another. I mean, it's so obvious that and media is passing off one idea. And not necessarily the truth, but often we don't ask the why. We just trust. If we were really of this higher intellectual group, before understanding, before believing, we would have to experience it ourselves, or really understand we have to really understand the correct inferential logic. Really have to understand the reasoning behind it. So, since we're part of those who have a lower intellectual ability, those who also think that they are of a higher intellectual ability, in the sense that we don't have this ability to understand everything first, but we do like to understand things, and so we mix things up a little bit. Before desiring to reach enlightenment for the benefit of others, first we need to understand what enlightenment is. And to understand this in reality, it's just not possible without an understanding of the correct view of reality. I'm going to try to explain myself better. Also, here having the sun in my face, I like the sun in my face, but I can't see people's faces, so I don't understand. I can't see if you're really understanding. It's important for me to be able to look at your faces. This is blinding me a little bit, but it's still pleasurable. What is a Buddha? What is the state of enlightenment? To understand better what a Buddha is, let's first try to understand better who we are, how we are, what we're made up of. We're beings. We have body and mind that are inseparable. They always go together. We have a coarse body together with a coarse mind, a subtle body, subtle mind, and a very subtle body that goes together with a very subtle mind. The gross mind is the direct perception of our senses, including the sense of the mind and the logic our projections, our memories, our ideas, etc. Instead, we have on a subtle level, we have our mind our mind is made up of attractions, aversions, fears, desires, etc. These aspects of our mind that are not manifest, the emotions, but not only, even those not manifest. For the example we often do, the example we make often is, I have anger, even if I don't feel angry right now. Where is it? It's in my subtle mind. So our subtle mind is always working, but we're not aware of it. Then we have a very subtle, mind where our emotions, imprints are, our choices. It's the continuum of our mind that goes from one life to the next. That which continues, that never stops, is the so-called very subtle mind. The very subtle mind doesn't have any conceptual understanding. It's not made up of attraction and aversion like the subtle mind, but it's made up of the imprints of our attraction, of our aversion. It's the imprint, it's the footprint of ourself. It's almost like a kind of DNA that goes from life to life, where there's a potential that can manifest or not. Is that clear? Good. At the same time, we're interdependent beings. This means that we are the result of all the interactions that come in the present, that unite with all of those that were in the past. We're interdependent beings. And in this context of ours, what happens is that the reality in which we live, and ourselves, every object of perception, every phenomenon that we can perceive, appears to us as if it existed autonomously, independently, objectively. The example that we make is that when we see someone else, we think we're seeing that person. We don't think we're seeing our version of that person. We think that we're seeing something, someone that's there outside of us. Tomorrow we'll get back to this point, but we live a reality that appears to us. So sounds and tastes and feelings, the objects that we perceive, the sensations that we have, the experiences that we have, our own identity, every object of perception appears to us as being objective, even if in reality it's not like that. Even if in reality everything that we perceive depends on causes and conditions, by the interaction between its parts and the whole, the imputation of the name. And tomorrow we'll look at this last aspect. In any case, the reality is subjective. Reality is relative. It's not objective. It's not absolute as it appears to us. So at the basis of our so-called ignorance, there's an appearance of intrinsic existence, because our ignorance doesn't come on a conceptual level. It's not that we stop to think, I think that phenomenon are of intrinsic existence. I mean, who has ever made this? Who's ever thought like this? I mean, have you ever made this kind of reasoning? No, I think phenomena really are objective and exist inherently. Have you ever made this, followed this kind of reasoning? Maybe someone has, but what would happen? Maybe spontaneously, we don't ask why or how. We see reality that appears to us as being objective and autonomous, and we follow that appearance. Like, for example, when we see our faces in the mirror, that's my face, and that's it. When instead it's not my face, it's nothing other than a reflection of my face in the mirror. Okay, so through this grasping, we have two characteristics. We have grasping at this reality, this objective reality, and we have the appearance of objective reality. Following the same metaphor, one aspect we have is the appearance of my face in the mirror and the fact that I believe that it's my face in the mirror. So I relate as if it were actually my face in the mirror because it appears as such. Is this distinction between the two clear? When I see the reflection of the moon in the lake, if I stop to think about it, it's clear that it's a reflection of the moon. Or do I really think that the moon is in the lake? No, I thought that was the moon. Oh. Obviously, we know that it's the reflection. Even a child, but we could actually say, like, oh, how beautiful, look, the moon in the lake. So it appears to us as if it were actually the moon in the lake, even if we know that it's not. But even if it appears, then we know that it's not. As soon as if it appears to us and we don't analyze, spontaneously we relate to it as if we'd say, oh, look at the moon today. Like the reflection or the form of our face in the mirror appears to us as being our face, and we relate to it as if it were our face, and we grasp at that appearance as if it were real. Is this clear up to this point? From this appearance and this grasping at this grasping at the inherent appearance, this grasping at this inherent existence, then we think that there's a separation, that things exist separately. This separation creates, as a consequence, a kind of dependency on these objects. And here we need to look a little bit. We see the causes, the roots of that materialistic utopia that we talked about the other day. Let me give you a quick example. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This is what we'll be talking about tomorrow, but that's okay. Do you like this sound? What about? No? Can we remember the feeling that we had when we heard the singing bowl sound? When I asked if you liked it, it was pleasurable. It's something you wanted to continue. Instead, when I touched the microphone, we wanted that to end. That's why we say it's not pleasurable. But now, spontaneously, without analyzing, if I want to repeat that feeling of pleasure by listening to the singing bowl, what do I need to do? Where do I project my energy so that I can hear that, so I can feel that feeling of pleasure again into the singing bowl? And I play it again because I want to have that same pleasurable sensation. I'm not going to touch the microphone because I don't want to have that feeling again. That's clear, isn't it? So without analyzing, what's the cause of this feeling of pleasure or of suffering in this case? The sound. The sound of the singing bowl on one side and the touching of the microphone on the other. Are we there? Now, here's a question. The same sensory objects, do they always bring the same result, the same feeling, coming into contact with the same type of object, the same object? Does that always bring you that same feeling? The same food brings the same feeling, same sensation, the same sound, etc. Does it always bring the same feeling? No. Why? If it's the cause of our pleasure, of our feeling of pleasure, because it's not. Let's analyze a little bit. Let's philosophize the sound. The perception of the sound, this feeling that we have, comes from something called contact, to which we add another mental factor called discernment. So contact is made of 3 parts. It's the union of sensory object, so vibrations in the air, which is a sound. This is a sensory object. This sense power, which is our hearing in this case, and sensory consciousness. Because, for example, when you do an anesthesia, what does anesthesia do? It closes the communication between sense power and sense consciousness. Anesthesia. So if you touch your skin, you don't feel it anymore, because that part of the nervous system that sends the signals to the brain. So on a medical point of view, I don't know exactly what happens, but I know that with a local anesthesia, that feeling, those signals are blocked, and so we don't have the feeling. And according to Buddhist philosophy, it's that when we feel something, it depends on these 3 points. So let's analyze a little bit the sound. Without analyzing, if I were to ask you, are we hearing the same sound or not? Do you hear the singing bowl? How many singing bowls are being played? Just one. So if I asked you, are we listening to the same sound without analyzing? We would say yes. I mean, there aren't 20, 30 singing bowls. It's the same. Analyzing this vibration in the air that comes through the air to my hearing, is it the same vibration or is it different among us, depending on where we are? I'm close. The sound comes to me directly. It goes into the microphone, comes out of the. There's so many different variables here. If we analyze the actual sound, the sound that I hear and the sound that you hear when I touch the singing bowl, objectively, it's not the same sound, even if it's similar, but it's not the same. My sense power and your sense powers, are they all the same? How I hear and perceive the frequencies, is it the same as yours? Each one of us has a hearing that's a little bit different. There are those who are more similar and those who are quite different. Remember that what is similar is by definition different. If it's similar, by definition, it's different. So a sense power is not the same. The sense power and the sense object, they're not the same. What about our sense consciousness? Do we all have the same sense consciousness? No. So are we listening to the same sound or not? Analyzing, the answer is no. Because the object's different, the object's different, the power is different, and the consciousness is different. And beyond this, when we have some kind of stimuli, after some kind of stimulation, some kind of feeling, we immediately apply some kind of discernment, or we give it a name with values and functions. And there are a little bit of our memories of the past. If I had been beaten every time I heard a singing bowl, when I'd go back, when I would hear now a singing bowl, it wouldn't be at all pleasurable, because it would bring me a memory of suffering, of memories of suffering. So the sound of the singing bowl is not objectively pleasurable. It's subjective. It depends on the sense power. It depends on the value that we attribute to it. Some sound frequencies, for example, for some, they generate negative feelings. Adolescents, for example, apparently adults are able to hear some frequencies that adults don't hear anymore. That's why, for example, in some shops that don't want kids around, they can play some kind of frequency that would bother young people, and so they wouldn't hang around because that frequency is bothersome. So when I hear something, it comes to me. I according to my own hearing, I hear it in a certain way. Someone who's more sensitive or less sensitive, they hear it all differently. And this depends also on the value that we attribute to it. If I connect this sound to a meaning, or a memory, a pleasurable memory, or something that I like, it's going to be pleasurable for me. Instead, if I connect it to something negative, or a negative memory, it's going to be unpleasant for me. Let's remember here that the feeling is no longer sensorial, it's mental, because the object through which now it's no longer the object that we're in contact with, but the value that we've given to it. Now, I liked it. Our tendency is that the sound appears to us as being objectively pleasant, and if I want to repeat that sensation of pleasure, that feeling of pleasure, I need to repeat the sound. But to repeat that pleasurable feeling, how many variables were there beyond just the sound itself? There's my sense power, the state of my sense consciousness, and the value that I give it. That's why the same object is not always going to bring, it doesn't always bring the same feeling, because they're all changing, and also the value that we attribute to it changes, and so as a result, the perception changes. Is this clear? Are we following? Now, this analysis that we've done, are we aware of this in our daily life or not? We're not aware. So what happens? Every time that I come into contact with an object, any object of the five senses, or an object of the sense of mind, a memory, or etc. If it's pleasurable, it appears as if that feeling depended on the object. We don't have this awareness of the sense power and the sense consciousness and the value that we've attributed to it. We give all of the power to the object. And what do we develop? We develop attraction to the object if it's pleasurable, and aversion if it's unpleasant. Are we following? So, and here we create really a dependency on the world around us that surrounds us. I'm independent of that feeling. it came from the singing bowl, or that unpleasant feeling came from the scratching on the microphone, has nothing to do with my senses or the value I give to it. I'm a victim of reality around me. So I create a sensation of dependency. I need that to be happy. I need to avoid that to be happy. And in front of this, we develop, attachment to one and aversion to the other. And if there's someone who plays the singing bowl, what feeling do I have towards the person who plays the singing bowl? Attraction. And instead, if there's one who's always touching the microphone, I have aversion to him because you are making me suffer because you're doing something that makes me suffer. From this, we develop desire, attachment, jealousy, envy, arrogance, miserliness, anger, hate, resentment, anxiety, fear, etc., etc. Are you there? Are we following? What happens is this. At the basis of all of this, where does this all come from? From the fact that reality appears to us as being of objective of existence, and we believe it's like that. We relate to it as if it were. This generates an attitude where we see ourselves separated from everything else, and it generates the feeling of selfishness and the kind of reliance on sensory objects. So I want reality to be like this. I want to avoid this. And then we're just like the material utopia that we talked about before. Now, this is how we are. This is how we are. And a Buddha instead. What does it mean to be a Buddha? A Buddha, first and foremost, is someone who it's easier to start at the beginning. Is someone who is not only someone who doesn't grasp at reality as being inherently existent, but he has a characteristic that's fundamental. So reality appears to Buddha as being interdependent. The Buddha, reality doesn't appear anymore in an objective, independent way, and obviously the Buddha doesn't grasp at it as being an inherent existence. He is not dependent on the reality that is around him, and of course it doesn't have selfishness or any of the mental defilements. So a Buddha lives in a state where without uncertainty, in a state where there's awareness of the similarities of everything, and also perfect awareness and the unique characteristics of everything too, and is able to act without doubt or uncertainty. Is the wisdom. There's all the five wisdoms, the wisdom of discernment and the all accomplishing wisdom. There's the wisdom of being able to see the differences, the wisdom of being able to see the similarities, and also being self-aware, being able to perceive every phenomenon as it is. Some studies say that we have in every second about 2 billion pieces of information that come to our brain. So among these impulses that come to our senses, or this aspect of space and time, there are about 2 billion pieces of information per second. And it's said that among these 2 billion, we are aware of about 2,000. So just from there, we can see that there's an enormous part of our being exists on a non-conscious level. A Buddha is also someone who's aware of those 2 billion pieces of information and is able to put them all together harmoniously. A Buddha is someone who, when is in front of any situation, person, object, is able to see all the specifics and the infinite possibilities that there are within that same object. What's the main difference between us and a Buddha? That to us, reality appears as being objective of intrinsic reality, and we grasp to it as if it were, and as a consequence we're selfish and we react negatively and we live in a negative cycle. Instead, a Buddha, not having this grasping at inherent existence, he has no selfishness, anger, attachment, etc. And he doesn't even have the appearance of intrinsic existence. It doesn't have the appearance of an objective appearance. He lives in total harmony with himself and reality. Are we able, like this, to have a clearer idea of what a Buddha is? A Buddha is a state of being. It's not a being. The name Buddha is given to those who have reached this state, but Buddha is not a person. It's not a being. There's Buddha Shakyamuni, who was a person who reached enlightenment, and he's called Buddha. But here, if we look at these paintings, and we see that being a Buddha is a state of being, and there are numerous, countless number of beings who have reached this state. So, do you have a better idea of what a Buddha is? The 3 levels of the mind of a Buddha, like coarse, subtle, and very subtle. The one who reaches enlightenment, what reaches enlightenment is the very subtle mind. So that from the very subtle mind, then the subtle mind comes up, and then the coarse mind, like at the time of death, where the gross absorbs into the subtle, and then into the very subtle, and then at rebirth, from the very subtle, the subtle mind appears, and then the coarse mind. And at this point, these 3 levels are absolutely pure. So here we're talking now about the 3 bodies of a Buddha. The Dharmakaya is the very subtle. The subtle level is Sambhogakaya, and the coarse level is called the Nirmanakaya. This is the body of essence is the Dharmakaya. The enjoyment body is Sambhogakaya, and the emanation body, Nirmanakaya. So it's the very subtle, and gross body of a Buddha. This is something, I don't know if you'll find this written anywhere. It took me a while to understand, and then I confirmed it with my masters, and they said it was right to look at it like this, because there's nothing explains. There's no characteristic of a Buddha that doesn't have a correspondence in us. Sure, what happens is on our mind, our ignorance, the appearance of inherent existence and the grasping at that exists at a very subtle level. That's why the path is not conceptual. It's a path of transforming, of developing wisdom and love to a level from a coarse level to a subtle level, and then very subtle. Now, with this, even if our idea is vague, but we should have a better idea of what a Buddha is. And here's the other question: can I reach this state or not? So what does it depend on, being able to reach this state or not? I can gradually diminish my selfishness. Can I gradually change my way of perceiving reality and understand that I'm not in an objective reality, but in a subjective reality, and gradually realize this interdependence and consequently realize the mind that realizes that reality doesn't appear, that the reality doesn't exist objectively. Tomorrow we'll talk more about this and then the different steps. But the point is, our mind is not objectively, intrinsically, autonomously, independently, objectively ignorant, but it is like this with its own interdependence. So that our mind is malleable, and once we're able to gradually change our way of seeing things, change our perceptions, have new experiences, gradually our mind transforms. And so the reason why it's possible to become a Buddha ourselves is because our being, our mind, it doesn't exist independently, objectively, but in an interdependent way, which means that it's permanent, that it's that it's impermanent, and it transforms depending on how it interacts. And to understand this deeply, tomorrow we'll talk about tomorrow we'll talk about how to realize the correct view of reality. These five paths. So how to become a Buddha through these 5 paths. 5 states of consciousness through which one can gradually that allow you to become a Buddha. It's the path of accumulation, Tsoklam in Tibetan, Tsoklam, the path of preparation, Jorlam, the path of vision, of seeing, Tonlam, and the path of familiarization or meditation, Gomlam, and the path of no more learning, Milonglam. Soglam, Jorlam, Tonlam, Gonlam, Miloblam. The path of accumulation, the path of preparation, path of vision, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. Okay, I'm thinking, should we explain it now or should we leave it for tomorrow? Okay, now let's just start. We'll do a little bit tonight, and then tomorrow we can pick it up again because it's really important to have some familiarity with it. These 5 paths, these states of consciousness, they're not places or they're states of consciousness that you can reach. One enters into the path of accumulation when he develops the total determination to want to reach enlightenment. So once I say I want at all costs to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, when one develops bodhichitta and this desire to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings, at that moment, the path of accumulation begins. So that's why we say the development of bodhicitta is the gateway to the path towards enlightenment. Like I say sometimes, the first thing we need to do for something to happen is to desire it. And bodhicitta is desiring reaching enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So when you develop this state through, for example, through the 6 points we talked about earlier today, when you have this strong intention, you enter into the so-called path of accumulation, and from here, starts the path of developing wisdom, because you've already developed love is the basis to enter into the path. What allows us to enter the path is bodhicitta, is the love towards all beings. It's also what gives us the energy to follow the path. These 5 paths are not easy, but what gives us the strength to follow the paths? It's, how do you say? It's the kind of it's the fuel. Is the love towards others, the mind of bodhicitta. And along this path, we need to perfect generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. But the 5 paths, they're highlighted, they're characterized by the realization of wisdom. So together there's generosity, there's patience, there's enthusiastic effort, but they're characterized by the development of wisdom. For wisdom, it's divided. The path is divided as follows. First of all, there's what's called, this is all within the path of accumulation. First, one needs to develop the wisdom of listening, of comprehension, and also the wisdom of meditation that regarding the correct view of reality. With regards to a correct view of reality, what are these 3 wisdoms? The wisdom of listening, tuchingi, is when one has the total certainty that nothing exists intrinsically, independently as it appears, but one doesn't have yet the logical understanding and much less a direct experience. It's when someone has a correct assumption. So I've read books, I've listened to teachings. I think it's like this. I believe, yes, it's interdependent. Why? I haven't understood fully, but I trust it to be like that. When one gets to this certainty, it's called a correct assumption. It's the certainty of something that it's free of direct experience and one's own logic. So when one has a correct assumption of the non-inherent existence of phenomenon, that's when one has realized the wisdom of listening. Then comes the listening of understanding. This is when we develop a correct inferential cognition related to to the correct view of reality. So inferential means that it follows some kind of logic and not kind of direct sensory experience. An example that's given of a valid inferential cognition is, I know that there's fire behind the mountain because I see smoke. And I know wherever there's smoke, there's fire. So I see smoke and I'm able to perceive, I'm able to perceive the fire. How do I perceive the fire? Through logical reasoning. So it's a valid inferential cognition. When we have a valid inferential cognition about the lack of inherent existence, and we're sure that the table, the sound, the flowers, or anything do not exist intrinsically, objectively, as they appear. Why? Because they're interdependent. And what that which is interdependent cannot be of intrinsic existence. Tomorrow we'll see more about this. But once one has reached this logical this logical conclusion, one has reached the so-called wisdom of understanding, Samjun Kisherab. Then we need to develop the wisdom of meditation or familiarization. Is when one gets to the conclusion that the sound or any other object appears as being of inherent existence, but one knows it's not, and one is able to block that appearance of inherent existence because one knows that it is not like that. When you're able to stay in meditation, in a single-pointed meditation, a so-called samatha, shamatha, where the mind is single-pointedly focused without distraction or without a mental fogginess, and when that meditative state generates a physical and mental pleasure, this is called realizing the wisdom of meditation on emptiness. And this is all in the path of accumulation. Then one develops vipassana or special insight. And here, not only can one keep the mind single-pointedly focused on the lack of inherent existence, which brings a physical and mental sense of pleasure, but a small part of the mind is able to also analyze the object. Why is it empty of inherent existence? So we unite we unite this analysis together with the single-pointed concentration meditation, totally free from mental agitation and mental fogginess. When that generates also this the physical and mental bliss, one has developed the profound view, special insight, lakton in Tibetan, vipassana in Sanskrit, on the correct view of reality. When you reach that state, one enters into the state of preparation. Then each one of these, there are many other levels within each of these paths that are explained. The path of preparation. When you're in the path of preparation, one is meditating on the lack of inherent existence still on a conceptual level, because I thought about it, nothing exists inherently. The sound appears as if it's of inherent existence. I know it's not like that. I stay in that concept. I block that appearance. I block that conception in meditation, in single-pointed meditation. When it's united with the analysis, when we keep on and keep repeating that, there'll be at a certain point where this experience is no longer conceptual and one has a non-conceptual experience of this non-inherent existence, and that is called a direct valid cognition. It's no longer conceptual. One is not perceiving a conception, a concept. One has a direct experience of non-inherent existence. It goes beyond words. One cannot put it into words. When one reaches this experience, it's when one enters the path of seeing. One sees reality as it is, not in a conceptual level, but on a direct experience, this lack of inherent existence. When one comes out of the meditation, reality appears as an illusion, appears as being objective, but one spontaneously knows that it's not like that. One doesn't need to reflect on it about, no, actually it's interdependent. No, naturally, spontaneously, one knows that reality is no longer, is not of intrinsic existence, even though it continues to appear as if it were. This is state of where reality is like an illusion. From this moment, when one gets out of when one is in a post-meditative state where reality appears as being of intrinsic existence, but one knows it's not, then one is in the path of meditation. One has entered the path of familiarization. If we take the 5 paths, where the path of accumulation is the starting point, and the path of no more learning is enlightenment, the last, this is our arrival. If we were to divide it into time, it's said that on average, 1/3 goes from the path of accumulation to the path of seeing, and 2/3 are in the path of meditation to reach the path of no more learning. The good news is, once I've reached the path of seeing, one gets out of samsara. There's no more suffering. There's no more anger, jealousy, envy, fear. There's no more rebirth in an involuntary way. The how and the why, etc. And for a but to help beings get out of their suffering, one needs to see every being and understand them to adapt themselves. So it's not enough. So that's why the path continues, the path of familiarization. In Gom in Tibetan, yes, it means to meditate, but first and foremost, it means to familiarize oneself. So in this case, the path of meditation is where the practitioner comes back to the meditation, a non-conceptual meditation. And when he's not in a meditative state, he doesn't have the grasping at intrinsic existence, but still has the appearance. And little by little, the appearance weakens. And there are many, many details in the meantime, but just simplifying, when at a certain point, this appearance weakens to the point that it stops to exist, when there is no longer the appearance. When there's no longer the appearance of intrinsic existence, then there's obviously not the grasping at such. One reaches the path of no more learning and becomes a Buddha. Now, we can go into many details to study the 5 paths. Normally, we spend about 3 months, studying the 5 paths. Here we've given just an overview to understand it. just to show you that there is a path to follow. It's not just, oh, Buddhas are there and I'm here, you know, how do you get there? There is a path. You know, we haven't gone into all the details. We don't know it all, but it's like looking at a map. Okay, look, there's a possible way. And that's already a lot if we're able to have that attitude. It's possible to reach that state. There's a path to follow. This path begins with a sincere feeling of love and desire to reach enlightenment, and it is developed through the part of method, love, generosity, morality, patience, effort, etc., and the part of wisdom, the correct view of reality. These two go together. What determines the various levels of realization, the arrival points have to do with wisdom and the correct view of reality. So when we say when we say in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, with the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. When we say, may I reach Buddhahood, may I enter into the path of accumulation and go to the path of preparation and path of seeing, complete the path of meditation to arrive at the path of no more learning. Tayata gate gate paragate para samgate bodhisoha. This mantra that Buddha Shakyamuni transmitted, that's part of the Heart Sutra, Tayata, which in Tibetan, diktate, which means it is as it is. Reality is empty of the reality is lacks inherent existence. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi. So we have gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, soha. So the mantra is how many parts? Tayata is the first. Then we have gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, and then soha. There's 7 parts to this mantra. So we have an opening and a closing. Tayata is the opening, and soha is the closing of it. Soha means may it be so. Tayata is it's like this, understood as nothing exists objectively inherently as it appears. Gate means go beyond. Parchin, go beyond. Go beyond. Gate gate. Parasamgate, go far beyond. Far beyond. Even more. Parasamgate. Gate gate paragate. Parasamgate. Sorry, gate means to go. Gate means to go, sorry. Gate, gate, go beyond, go far beyond. Bodhi, enlightenment, may it be so. Go. The first goal is enter into the path of accumulation. The second going is entering into the path of accumulation, and the go far beyond is where one has gone into the when we go far beyond, then we're eliminating the imprint of our ignorance, and bodhi, the essence of enlightenment, may it be so hard. So a very quick translation of the mantra, Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha, we could say all phenomenon, Mac, intrinsic existence, it is like this. Go. Realize them on a conceptual level and through the path of accumulation, and also through the path of preparation, not just on a conceptual level, but also in meditating in shamatha and in special insight. And then realize non-inherent existence in a non-conceptual level in the path of meditation. Then with the path of seeing, and then familiarize yourself in the path of meditation, so that there is no longer even the appearance of intrinsic existence, and at that point one reaches the state of enlightenment, the path of no more learning, the total, the state of awakening. Have you ever heard of the Buddha being called the awakened one? Why? Because today we have the appearance of intrinsic existence and the grasping. So the metaphor is that we're dreaming and we don't know that we're dreaming. So, what we see, we think is true, like in our dreams that we don't realize, where we don't really we're sleeping, dreaming. When you reach the path of seeing, it's like dreaming, but you know that you're dreaming. So the dream appears, but we know it's still a dream. And no more learning is actually waking up from the dream, and you don't even have the appearance of the dream. And as a consequence, of course, you don't even have the grasping. So in this moment, we have this appearance of intrinsic existence and the grasping at intrinsic existence. And when we reach the path of seeing, that the next, afterwards, after when you come out of meditation, one has the appearance of intrinsic existence, but one doesn't grasp to it as being real. And so spontaneously, naturally, one knows that reality is not as it appears, even if it continues to appear as so. And then when one reaches enlightenment, it's a state where not only does one not grasp at phenomenon as being intrinsic existence, they don't even appear as such. So these are the 5 paths. It's a little bit what we mean by reaching enlightenment and reaching the totally awakened state. I know there are many concepts that we've put together here, but it's important gradually to create familiarity with these concepts, even if we're not studying them in an academic way. We could study the 5 paths, the definitions, the classifications, enter one to the next. But I think that doing this way, where we have a more general idea, and then getting more into detail. First of all, we have this feeling that there is a path to follow, that it is possible to follow this path. Now, in this path, we saw that this path is made up of 2 parts. Getting into the path is we need love, bodhichitta, and then to grow along the path, we need wisdom. But the starting point is love. But love, not only, it's a love that makes us want to reach enlightenment. But now that we've seen what a Buddha is, we need to understand also what the correct view of reality is. The clearer this idea the clearer our idea of the correct view of the reality is, the clearer our understanding of what a Buddha is. I don't think it's possible to understand what enlightenment is if one doesn't have an understanding of the correct view of reality. So the gateway of this path is developing bodhichitta. Like the prayer that we do every once in a while. May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the mind become the Dharma means may my thoughts, my objectives, my mundane thoughts, where my life's objective is simply to live a pleasurable, comfortable reality, live in this material utopia that we talked about a lot yesterday. May I no longer project my happiness onto that which cannot sustain it. May I project my happiness onto the development of my qualities. May my mind become the Dharma. May my mind be directed towards the Dharma. May this mental state become the path. We enter into the path of accumulation when we develop bodhicitta. We're talking about Mahayana paths. There's also the Hinayana paths. And I'm not going to get into details about this, otherwise we'll get confused. But we enter the path when we develop bodhicitta. So, even if the paths are 5 times 3, because there are 3 different approaches of the 3, there are 3 different approaches of the 5 paths, but the other 2 don't take to enlightenment, but only to getting out of samsara. It's only Mahayana path takes you to. Only the Mahayana path takes you to enlightenment. We're not going to get into the details about this now. But the gateway to the path that takes us to enlightenment is bodhicitta. So, bodhicitta is not only important as an inner state, but also as that which allows us to enter into the path and the process of becoming a Buddha. Now, the question is, how do we develop bodhicitta? And there are 2 main methods that and our lineage considers both of them, puts them both together, and they're part of the Lojong teachings. One is the 7 causes and the result that we saw this morning at the end of this morning's teaching. Marshe, or rather, recognize beings as our mother, gratitude, wanting to repay their kindness, love, compassion, supreme intention, and taking the commitment, responsibility to do for others, and the desire to reach Buddhahood for the benefit of others, bodhicitta. At the basis of this, there's equanimity. This is one path. The other path that can come also parallelly, it can be one or the other, can come in parallel. You know, they work also separate. Like in our lineage, you can unite them, but they can also be separate. The other path is called equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. Dakshin Nyamche. Dak means oneself, Shen means others, Dakshin, Nyam means to equalize, Je means exchange. How does this path come about? Let's see. First of all, we need to equalize. Equalize means create equanimity, but there are many types of equanimity. the equanimity that's created here is where on one side we have our selfishness, this obsession to self-gratification, and on the other side we have the other beings. You know, there's what I want for myself, and then there's what I want for others. A natural attitude of selfishness is what's good I want to keep for myself, and what's not good can go to anyone else. So the first thing is to say this importance. So my happiness is as my happiness is as important as everyone else's happiness, and everyone wants to be happy in the same way. No one wants to suffer. Everyone tries to be happy the way we do, taken by their own ignorance and etc. So this first point is that there's no difference between me and others, and at that point we get to the other level of equanimity, where we try to get out of this game of attraction to some and aversion to others. We try to see that everyone is in the same situation. You know, my enemy today was my friend yesterday. You know, my friend today will be my enemy in the future. So it's all very seeing someone as a friend or an enemy, or having attraction or aversion, is very relative. I don't know if it's ever happened to you in life that someone who was a dear friend at some point, you know, is no longer. It can happen. Or you know, or you have you know, it's difficult for someone to be a friend and remain a friend with that same amount of attraction forever. But it's also possible that, you know, someone for whom we have a tremendous amount of aversion one day can become a friend. I mean, who determines friend or enemy? It comes from us, the value we give. And so we realize that really it's totally relative, the whole concept of friend or enemy, and we should gradually generate this equanimity where we no longer have this attraction to some and aversion to others. We open ourselves, and here we get into the part of exchanging. So we equalize. We see there's no difference between me and you, and there's no difference between you and the others. We are all in the same boat. We're all in the same samsara, trying in the same way to get out. And in the end, it's not that one is better and one is worse off. You know, we're trying to follow this path. Your happiness is not worth more than mine. Your suffering isn't worth more than mine, like mine isn't, you know, and vice versa. Even if we don't often think like that, you know, is your happiness more important to you than mine? No. What about for yourself? Yes, you know, it's more important because it's my own. I mean, that. You know, my suffering is worth more than yours because it's mine. Instead, I mean, that's how we reason. Instead, suffering is suffering, you know, regardless of whether it's mine or yours. And happiness should be achieved, you know, mine, yours. Once we're able to equalize, then we can move on to the next part, which is exchanging. We're exchanging the attitude. So I'm going to change this attitude of selfishness with an attitude of altruism. And here we can use the Tonlen practice. And this is absolutely part of this exchanging self with others, this Tonlen practice. It's not that we put ourselves in the other we're not putting ourselves in their shoes. What we need to exchange is our attitude. the attitude that we normally have of attraction, the attraction towards happiness and aversion towards suffering, normally is related to the I and the mind. We need to direct it to everyone. So this attitude of indifference that we have towards others, or attitude of aversion, we need to direct that towards our selfishness, this obsession of self, the I and the my. I don't know if this is clear, more or less. So what happens is, I'm just repeat, what's the attitude that we have towards ourselves? Strong attachment to happiness and aversion to suffering. What if I take that same attitude and I direct it towards you? I want your happiness and I don't want you to suffer. I've redirected the same attitude to you, but I take that attitude of indifference towards the other, and it's not that I direct it towards myself, but towards my own selfishness, that attitude of obsession with self-gratification. I am going to ignore that attachment to the self-gratification. I'm going to say, this is not important. The attitude I have towards others, the attitude I normally have towards others, now I have it towards my own selfishness. This is what's difficult here, is that we could think that I need to ignore myself and consider others, and it's not like this. I need to ignore, I need to cut off this attitude of obsession with self-gratification. And what I need to develop is the attitude where your happiness is as important to me as my own. I take that feeling of attraction to happiness and I expand it to others. It's not that I take it away from myself, I expand it to others. So it's equalizing, and dakshe namche. It's so equalizing oneself and change oneself with others, which means I take this attitude that I have towards myself and I put it onto others. I redirect it onto others. There's a very important aspect here that shows us that the altruism that we're talking about is an extension of selfishness. It's a redirecting of selfishness. Because what is selfishness? This attitude where I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. This is how selfishness manifests. But what we're doing here, we're taking this strength that we already have. We have this strength of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering, and we redirect it to others. I don't need to try to develop something new. I need to take what I already have and I need to redirect it. Dakshen, me and others. Dakshen, me and others. And then I need to equalize and then exchange. So instead of, I need to take the exchange that I do is I take the feelings and the attitude I already have and I redirect it towards others. So because the happiness of others becomes as important to me as my own, and I redirect my aversion towards my own selfishness. And here we use the Tonlen meditation, the taking the suffering onto ourselves and the giving of happiness to others, remembering to visualize that my heart, this black masses of suffering, the negativities of others, they come in and they absorb into the black mass, weakening it, and remember that we also, the part where we give the peace and joy, this light rays and nectar to others that take everyone to a state of happiness and joy and peace. revitalizing their strengths and their qualities, their love, their peace, etc. So, for me, one key is, we use the 7 causes and result to generate gratitude and become closer to others. And then to put into practice all that, we're going to exchange our attitude. We're going to take that energy that's directed only towards ourselves and we're going to redirect it towards others. If we're able to understand that altruism is redirecting selfishness, it changes so much. Because, okay, someone say, I'm selfish. How can I just become altruistic? By taking what you already are and by learning how to redirect it to others. It's not something totally separate from you. So the 7 causes and result help us to generate this feeling of gratitude and affection, love, of closeness to others. Then once we've done that, we can focus on equanimity and then exchange our attitude, which is what we do with the Tonlen, where we develop an attitude that's the opposite of selfishness. And by doing this, when we take on the negativities of others, it weakens our own selfishness, and we give a joy. So we're inverting our attitudes, our behavior. We're going against selfishness. We're opposing selfishness, but really, is it possible to take someone else's suffering on to myself? If it were possible, then why haven't the Buddhas done it? It would be easy. It'd be, an enlightened being who has this ability to transform. We go there, they take our suffering, and we're fine. They take our mental defilements, and we're great. It's not possible. Taking the suffering of someone else is not possible. It's possible that we suffer for someone else's suffering. This is possible, but let's remember the basic law of karma, where what we experience the results of actions that we ourselves actions that we have done. I can't experience someone else's karma. But we meditate as if that were possible. So maybe someone would ask, well, just imagining something that's not possible, that makes it very fake. But the point of the meditation is not that the suffering of the others need to come onto me. The point of the meditation is generating an opposite attitude to selfishness. So someone will say, oh, but if I do Tonlen, what if I get sick? I've taken on the suffering of others. No. It can happen that because of conditions, maybe could it happen that someone gets sick after having done the Tonlen practice? But then that's if that were to happen, then the Tonlen is nothing other than a condition through which one then ripens one's own karma. There's a nice story. One of our friends, Mr. Koch, I told this story once. Many years ago, he was in Malaysia. He lives there. He's a disciple of Lama Ganchen. At a certain point, he had to do a prostate surgery, and at a certain point, he was in the hospital. before the surgery, they came. They did an echo, and they did a sonogram, and they measured. They defined the kind of surgery, etc. He was in the hospital, and when they prepared him for the surgery, and they did some anesthesia, and he was imagining that all beings, all the suffering would be absorbed into his prostate, and he then fell asleep. And then when he woke up, the doctors came and they said something strange happened. Right before the surgery, we did the exams. We saw the size of your prostate, but during the surgery, your prostate was much bigger. We've never seen such a large prostate. It's so strange. And they asked if they could even do research on it. They would donate it for. He said, "Oh," he was laughing inside himself. He said, "I know why it was got so big." Well, and then someone say, "Oh, well." So then he did take the negativities upon himself. I mean, let's remember something. We cannot experience anything for which we have not created the causes, but we can create we can create the causes and conditions to experience our own result. But let's remember that the point of Tonglen is to go against our own selfishness. So this black mass in our heart, the negativities enter and they eliminate this black mass at our heart, and then we exhale and we give virtuous things, our positive karma, our body, our joy, our peace, our qualities. Maybe someone would say, "I have so little, how can I give to everyone?" It multiplies. That's why we say also direct and indirectly. I mean, what I have now and what I will have in the future. And let's concentrate on both. By meditating at the beginning on those who are closest to us. I'm sure that if you did 20 minutes a day of Tonglen, visualizing the people closest to us, and maybe those with whom we have a certain difficulty, after a week, when one finds himself in front of that person, the feelings will have changed. It won't be the same. There's a change that comes. It's a strong practice, without a shadow of a doubt, because we're directly opposing directly opposing the way we've always done things. And so there's a part of ourselves that trying to save itself, saying stop, but we need to stay firm and remember that we're not going against ourselves. We're just opening ourselves up to include others. So, and then we add also of taking on our sufferings of the past, our present, our future, to make peace with ourselves before we can help others. So, in short, may I offer to all my mothers, both actually and indirectly, whatever will benefit and bring them joy. And may I hiddenly accept on myself all my mother's troubles and woes. The sufferings of my mothers. As I said these days, I commit myself to look at the translation of the text. Also because Tibetan can be translated in one way or another. It's not so easy, but I think we're we're managing quite well to understand the meaning of the text and what they're, what he's telling us to do. We're managing, right? With this, we conclude for today, remembering that it's one of the most important practices that exists. The practice of Tonlan can be done also on a very practical level. When we have pain, for example, what's the selfish way that we act in front of pain? I want my pain to end, and I don't care about anything else. And when we feel pleasure, we want that pleasure to last. So our attitude when we feel pleasure is to reinforce selfishness, and when we feel pain, we're reinforcing selfishness. There are two things that we can do. When we feel something pleasant or have some kind of pleasure, I drink water and it's pleasurable. I feel this pleasure. And at the same time, I connect myself with others and I say, may every being experience this pleasure that I am feeling. And the more pleasure I feel, the more I want to offer it to others. So there's not a feeling of guilt. No, it's a tool to be able to give to others. So as I feel pleasure, I see something beautiful, or I feel joyous, or may every being experience what I'm experiencing now. And I give it and I offer to them. And with suffering, for example, if I have a headache, I say, may I, by curing my own headache, may any other being who has a similar suffering be free from this suffering and pain through my own. I'm not thinking, how I'm not asking or hoping that my pain increase. I'm saying through my pain, through my suffering, may I eliminate not only my own suffering, but may I eliminate also that of everyone. If I'm feeling lonely, if by eliminating my own loneliness, may I eliminate the loneliness of everyone else. So through feelings of pleasure, through feelings of pain, we're not increasing our, not reinforcing our selfishness. So the Tonlan practice is there. I learned the Tonlan practice in many different texts and in many different teachings, but these are the steps. Traditionally, what happens is, the guides are the texts that we follow, like this one. And then at the end of the year, for example, we're going to look at the 7-point mind. We're going to look at the 7-point mind training, and that also includes the Tonlan practice, and we'll look at that again. You can also we can do the practice together, but the difficulty in doing them together is that everyone has his own time, rhythm, so it's difficult to do it, all together because everyone has his own rhythms, Maybe tomorrow we can also do the Tonlan practice briefly together. So this is a powerful practice. It's very practical. It's not, we're not talking about, there are concepts to learn. Many things, many names are probably new to many of you, but what's important is to familiarize ourselves with certain attitudes and to generate an attitude that's opposite our own selfishness. But when you start to do it seriously, maybe at a certain point one say, there's a part of ourselves that says, stop it, what are you doing? This selfishness that just can't handle it anymore, and that's a good sign. Just to conclude, even I've seen Lama Ganchen. I saw Lama Ganchen many times. You know, I saw him, for example, actually 2 times in particular. I remember when he had a strong physical pain. Once was kind of my fault. We were here. There was a ceremony here at the center, and Rinpoche came by car, and there was the whole procession via Shambhala, and Rinpoche came out of the car, and I respectfully, I closed the door respectfully. I didn't see that his hand was in the door, and I closed the door on his hand. It wasn't. I didn't close it very hard, but I saw that it hurt. And I said, "What happened? What happened?" And he said, "Be quiet. Pretend nothing happened." So, you know, he didn't want to make anybody worry. But as we walked together here, I could see that it was painful. He was reciting he was reciting under his breath the verses of Tonlen, where he says, "I take onto me the suffering of others and I give them my own joy." That the text that's in the Guru Puja. So to say, on a very practical level, if I feel pain, may through the pain that I'm experiencing eliminate others' pain. I'm not asking for my pain to increase. I want to eliminate and cure my pain. I'll do what I need to do, but I'm not there just thinking about my own pain. I open up my heart towards others. If I see something beautiful, I dedicate it to others. When there's something beautiful, I offer to my gurus, I offer to the holy beings, and I offer to the holy beings, and I dedicate to all beings. So if we share something with someone who is so and then I give it to to beings. When we give something to someone who is spiritually more elevated than us, then it's an offering. And instead, if it's to someone who spiritually is at our same level, it's an act of generosity. So this is very, very practical. If we know how to do this well, then we'll enjoy the pleasure even. We'll enjoy it even more without any sense of guilt. We really should enjoy these pleasures. The practice of Lojong, you know, it takes a whole lifetime. I mean, it's not something we learn once and it's done. It's something that accompanies us throughout our lifetime. And here today we conclude this practice of Tonlen, this practice of giving and taking. And tomorrow we'll do a brief meditation of Tonlen together in the morning. And then we will conclude with the last verse that is really quite dense. And towards the end of the year, we will look at the 7-point mind training, which is very similar, but there are many other passages. It's a little bit more structured, let's say. And I'm really happy because we started with the jewel garland of a bodhisattva that is more generic on how to direct one's life. Now we're in the 8 verses that is more specific about developing love and wisdom, and then we'll go to 7-point mind training, which is the same path in a more structured way. Time for our dedications.
Dragun namda shingla che parasho Jetsun lame kutse rapten chin nam karatrin le chokchur gepadang losan tempe drunme sasun ki drove munsel takto ne gyur chi yedam guru ratna mandral kam niryata yami Kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheke pela longche ching sadan lamge yunte rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho chanchobo semcho rimpoche ma ke panama ke gyurchi kepa nyampra me payang kongne konto pelwar sho
May the precious mind of bodhichitta that has not yet arisen arise and grow. May that which has not yet arisen not degenerate and grow forevermore.
May the precious body mind, which has not yet born, arise and grow, which has born have no decline and increase forevermore. Nimo dele tsendele, nime kuyan delek shing, ninsen takto delek pe, kuncho sumke chingi lob, kuncho sumke ngodrubot sol, kuncho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Simcho Sudra, Cho Lam Tudro, Lam La Parche, Mio Marsho. Possa la mente diventare il Dharma, possa il Dharma diventare il sentiero, possa il sentiero essere libero da interferenze. May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free from interferences. Mi me tserwe ter chen chen rezi drime ekimpe wampo jampe liang du pong malu jom tse sang we dang kan chen kepe tso gen tsong kapa lo san trak pe shabla solvade. Buonanotte a tutti, buona serata, ci vediamo domani mattina. Grazie. 10:30.
Scusate, c'è un annuncio solo per gli ospiti che sono